obviously the number one thing that we see where there has been that breakdown, and they have come to us, is often bullying, and where people feel like they are being ostracised in the workplace and do feel like sort of the card is stacked against them, and they're not sure what they can do to actually overcome that. Obviously, there's multiple elements, including discrimination elements relating to protected characteristics, for instance, religion, belief, sex, gender, everything like that. Obviously, sometimes it's just a human issue. It's just that people don't get along. And obviously, you're not going to get along with everyone. There are cases where people just can't see eye to eye. But it's what do they do when that relationship is broken down to the point where it's no longer professional and they cannot deal with that situation?
The other common question that we get is, how do I deal with it? And in respect to that, it entirely depends on the situation. That's a grey area and it's fact specific. So with, for example, a bullying complaint or something like that, how would you typically deal with that?
The thing that I would recommend to people in the first instance, and obviously they may have already done this, but it's to try and resolve things informally. It's to try and build bridges, find common ground, and try and reach a point where you can protect that employment position and recover that employment position. And if that means having a chat with the person, obviously it's sometimes difficult, but having a chat with the person who might be, in your eyes, causing the problem, or having a chat with management or HR, and people who should be there to support you in that employment relationship and in the workplace. But obviously it doesn't work all the time, and sometimes they need to escalate it further. And in which case they may have to look at making a formal complaint or a formal grievance. Is that more or less what you would typically see?
It would be, and if I may add to that, another common question that we get is, okay, what if my problem is with my line manager? And that's what a grievance policy and or the handbook states I've got to do. And with that, and again, it's a grey area, but there should be someone else named in the policy, or if you feel comfortable going to someone more senior, then perhaps have a conversation with them. And at the end of the day, that employer has a duty of care towards you. And if you have a serious complaint, then that should be treated fairly and seriously. In regards to informal situations, hopefully you can have that conversation, but if not, like you were leading on to, when does it become formal? What do you need to do then? And that's when it comes to a grievance.
Well, the grievance, first of all, we'd like to hope that it's carried out without any bias and impartially, and hopefully, say if it was that line manager who was actually the subject of that grievance, hopefully there's other people in place, like you touched on, who you can go to. But ultimately, it depends on the policy, doesn't it? There's a ACAS code of practice, which is the guidance for how an employer should handle a grievance, and that may be a good starting point. But ultimately, it will depend on the policy, and it will depend on the size of the employer as well. If they're a small company, a small employer, they may not have an HR team. They may not have the full expertise that other big companies have. So it's a difficult question, but it should be set out in the policy. That's what we would like to hope for, at least anyway. And it's clearly set out as to how the employee can handle that process.
And I think if I may add to that, people ask us, what's the point of going through a grievance? And that comes down to, okay, what does an employment tribunal expect to see? So an employment tribunal will expect to see that you've exhausted all internal processes and or try to resolve it informally with your employer. That's really important to bring an employment tribunal claim. And that's where, again, if you don't feel comfortable going through that process, then again, you have a conversation with them about that if they came for advice. But in regards to the actual grievance process, that's done. You go through an appeal if you don't agree with it, etc. And at that point, we come in at certain points, say, we can help you with the appeal, we can help you with making a claim. But certain steps have to be followed in respect